Hello and welcome to today's video. My name is Anniken and I live in the southwest of England, where I teach knitting workshops and design knitting patterns. So I post videos on YouTube every Friday, and it is a combination of my Confessions of a Yarn Addict podcast, yarn and knitting product reviews and knitting tutorials. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I hope you enjoy it here. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you very much for coming back. I really appreciate your time. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and please leave a comment. So today I'm actually going to talk about how to wind yarn and also talk about difference between two different types of swifts. And a bit of a product review of my new Swift. So I just got this Knit Pro Swift, so I'm going to show you how this works and what I think about it. And then I also got a new Knit Pro ball winder that way up, so I'm going to show you how this works and what I think about it. And this is my old Swift, which I've had for many years. It was the first Swift I bought, and I'm going to show you how this works as well. So you can tell the difference between how one of these works and how... So you can tell the difference between how one of these works and how one of these works, and what would suit your circumstances better. This, I don't actually know the brand of this Swift. I bought it many years ago. I got a feeling it may be called something like Sunflower Swift. It was a lady I used to know from an online knitting forum I used to belong to many years ago when I first got back into knitting, probably about 15 years ago, or 13, 14, 15 years ago. I don't know whether she still makes these. I have no idea. I've had this for years. I believe it's called, I've seen it called an Amish Swift. But I don't know whether that's the name. I've seen Americans call it an Amish Swift, and I don't know whether that's what we call it here in Europe or not. But regardless of the make, they all work in more or less the same way. So I'm going to show you now how I use these different products and also what I think about them. So enjoy this video. Okay, so I'm trying to work out the best way to actually film this so you can see what I'm doing. But this is my old Swift. I've had this Swift for many years, probably close to 15 years. It was the first Swift I bought. I've always had a problem with this one like moving around the table. So at one point I put loads of blue tack on it, but that didn't really help. I could do it trying to scrape that off. But I did find last time I used this Swift, also if I put it on this cork mat, it didn't move around so much. I haven't actually used this for a long time. I did use it recently, but I haven't really used it for a long time because I had a different Swift I used. But I believe this is called, I've seen American YouTubers call it an Amish Swift. I don't know whether that's the official name or that's just the American name, but I don't know. And I don't know whether this brand is still available. It doesn't have any branding on it. I don't know whether it's still available. So this one you adjust the size by putting these pegs into a hole, and I've got 5 pegs. And I've actually managed to not lose any of them. I got this little pencil pouch I got years ago, and I keep them in there. So I'm going to wind this skein, which is Manos del Uruguay Fino, which is quite a small small skein size. So a lot of hand-dyed yarn come in skein sizes that are probably nearly 2 meters. This has been rewound after it's been dyed, so it was probably on a bigger circumference when it was dyed, and then it's been made smaller, probably rewound onto a smaller circumference after it was dyed to tidy it up a bit. So there's usually at least 2 ties, so you just got to make sure you break those off. Be a bit careful that you don't break the actual yarn. So you want to make sure that this is fairly taut. So I've got it on 3 on all of them except for this one. If I try and put it too high out, then I don't know if you can see, but this one's starting to lift. So if you put it on too far out, it'll start lifting. If you want to have it fairly taut because the yarn's less likely to tangle without the arms lifting. As you wind this yarn, it will start to feel looser. So sometimes right towards the end I have to move one of these pegs further out. Ideally you should have all the pegs on the same hole, but sometimes I find I may have them on one hole on two of them and another hole on the other two just to get the right size, and that's fine. So sometimes I've had it say on hole number 4 on this one and the one opposite, and then these on 3 or something like that, just to make it work. Okay, this is my new Knit Pro natural ball winder. They do a signature one as well, which has this bit and this bit in the signature Knit Pro signature needles colours, the coloured wood. But I bought the natural one because it's a bit cheaper. So the first thing you want to do is thread the yarn through this guide. Now you can either try and aim it through the middle, or you can put it onto this bit and then just pull it through like that. There we go. So it goes. And then on here, you find there's like 2 notches here. So you pull it down into those notches. Now this swift needs to be level with your ball winder. So if it's at a higher or lower level, you'll have problems. And it's always a good idea just to make sure that your yarn is unwinding freely before you start. So, problem with my dining room table is that it tapers at the edge. So I can't get this right to the edge of the table. It's probably about nearly an inch, which isn't ideal because it makes this a little bit wobbly. But we'll see. So now all I need to do is wind this one. So the moment it was just taking off the slack. Now, I've always tended to hold on to the yarn before it feeds through this guide, and that is so that if there's any problems with it catching or snagging, you sometimes do get some skeins that are a little bit tangled, especially if they've been hand dyed and not rewound. So I tend to always hold on to the yarn as it's coming off my swift and onto the ball winder. That also means that I'm adding a little bit of tension to it. So the best thing to do is to try and wind the yarn off the outside of the swift. This one is just, the yarn's moving into the inside a bit. So I'm just moving these a little bit just to make sure the yarn winds off smoothly. Okay, there we go, let's try that. If I have wound off some like I have here, I always hold on to the yarn when I start again, just to make sure I keep an even tension. On my old ball winder, which was really rubbish, my old manual one, I had to hold on to the yarn before it went through the yarn guide on the ball winder, this bit here, just because otherwise it didn't wind on evenly. But I don't know what this one's like because it's the first time I'm using it. But it feels quite nice and smooth to use, it's not noisy. One thing to remember is if I stop winding on this, the swift will keep moving. So if you are winding along, and I'm going fairly slowly now, I'll speed up in a minute, but if you are winding along like this and you suddenly need to stop, you need to stop the swift. So I normally have my hand ready just to grab it and stop it. So I managed to get a little bit of a loose bit here, and that's probably because I've been stopping and starting a bit. So I'm actually just going to undo this a little bit. If you keep stopping and starting, ball will wind a bit unevenly. So that's not ideal. So I'm just going to go out. There we go. Okay, let's try and do this without stopping again. Whoops, I actually could feel that. The other advantage with having the yarn go through your hands, oops, okay, as I leant across the table, I knocked this bit off, so I'm just going to attach this again. Another advantage to having the yarn run through your fingers as it feeds onto the ball winder is that you can feel if there are any knots. Let me just screw this back on again. There we go. Okay, so one thing it does say, which I hadn't noticed, is that to maintain the shape, so to maintain the balanced shape mounted only while using the winder. So it's got this goes around here, this drive band I think it's called, and it says that basically you should take it off, I guess because it's now kept under tension, and when you're not using it you don't need it under tension, and that will keep it, make it last longer. So as I was feeding this through my hand, I could feel like there was a knot here, so I'm just going to undo that knot now, because I know that wasn't a yarn being knotted together. I know that was a knot that was created by me pulling the yarn back off here. So I've just taken that out. Okay, let's try and go a bit faster. So this ball winder is kind of a little bit wobbly, but I think that's just because of the shape of my table. I can just stop it again for a second, see if I can tighten it up a bit more. If you have a table that has like a straight edge, I think you'll have less of a problem. I've always had a problem with this table with ball winders, no matter which ball winder I've tried, it's always been a bit of a problem. I'm hoping when I get my new Knit Pro umbrella Swift, which I'll add to the end of this video, I'm hoping I can use, do this in my office. But I can't use this in my office because it folds out, this Swift needs quite a lot of space, and I haven't got that space in my office. So let's keep going. I'm going to see how quickly I can wind this ball now. Okay, so as I was coming towards the end of my Swift, end of my ball, not Swift, one of these pegs actually fell off and flew halfway across my lounge floor, so it kind of flew off. I think that's because as this yarn, the skein becomes smaller, it does become a little bit looser, so it's always a good idea towards the end to actually stop and see if you can tighten it up. Another thing I've had happen before with these kind of Swifts is that as you get to the end, one of these just kind of flops upwards. I've had that happen before. I was going very fast, but I really like the shape of the ball. It looks very neat. As I'm starting again, I've noticed that the yarn's just wound around the bottom here, so I'm just going to take it through. Just, I don't want it winding around the bottom here. I want to try and get a very neat, okay, I was going to hit my tripod. So let's just finish this bit off. Another problem with this kind of Swift is that your skein has two ends. So it's got the end that you are winding now, and then I'm winding onto this. Okay, I'm going to stop again. So what's happening here is this, your skein has two ends. The end that's gone onto the ball band, then it's got another end. And that end, I don't know whether you can see it, can you see this yarn going here? That end has actually wound onto the base of my Swift. Now I couldn't see that end when I started, but it is a good idea if you have one of these loose ends to actually tie it to one of these pegs before you start. I couldn't actually see it. I'm not going to actually tie it on, but I'm just going to wind it around that peg just so it doesn't happen again. Let's see if we can, because I haven't got much left to do now, so let's just see if we can finish this quickly. There's not much left. But I'm very impressed with the ball winder. It's very nice and smooth and even and comfortable to use. It's a little bit wobbly, but that's because of the problems I was saying about my table being tapered, and it is making my whole table shake a bit. But this table is quite old now. It's over 20 years old, probably about 25 years old, I think, and it's slightly wobbly. So a little bit lower again. Slow it down. So before you stop it, it's a good idea to slow it down and have your hand ready to go on the Swift to stop it. So it creates a slightly different shape ball than my last ball winder did, but I really like it. If you like to knit from the center, there's this little strand that goes through here, the one that we clipped across there to start with. If you want to knit from the center, it's a good idea to pull that one out. I'm not going to. So that's the ball it creates. So it has this little hole here. I guess that will kind of fill out and relax, but you could put on there. Knitbra also sell, like, I don't know what they're called, but they're basically a round base with a stick on it, and you can basically put your ball onto it like that and then knit from it. So I guess that's probably why they have this hole, but that hole will probably relax a bit as the yarn relaxes. But it's wound quite tightly. Now some people don't like very tightly wound balls. It can stretch the yarn a bit. I've never really had a problem with it. Never noticed a problem with it. I guess the main thing would be if you wound something, left it for a long time, like months or years, or if you had several balls and you wound one and didn't wind the others, then maybe the tension would be slightly different. But I'm not sure. I've never had a problem with it. But it feels quite nice and firm. I like the shape of it. It's very good. So I've got two more. I've got two more now that I've got to wind. So I'm not going to make you watch me do that. But so now, remember, I moved one of these out because towards the end it was getting too loose, and now I can't actually fit it on. So I'm going to take that one out. There we go. That's just about. And then I'm going to wind the other two. And when I get my umbrella Swift, I will show it how it works with that as well. And then I'll splice the videos together and give you my full verdict on what I think. Even if you can't get this maker Swift, and I can't remember what it's called, I think there are other companies that do the same type of Swift. I believe they're called Amish Swift. They may be slightly different, but I believe there are other people doing similar types of Swifts. Even if you can't get this make, you might be able to get something else that's similar. So my new Swift arrived. This is the Natural Swift from Knit Pro. They also do one which has the same colours as the, if you can see that, as the Knit Pro signature needles, but that costs more money. So I decided to go for the cheaper one, which is the natural one. As I mentioned earlier, when I was showing you my ball winder, which is here as well, my dining room table kind of tapers a bit, so it's very difficult. The bit at the bottom here where you clamp it onto the table is not very deep, so I couldn't actually clamp it onto my dining room table, which is a bit of a nuisance. I'm hoping to mainly use it in my office, but it's easier to film it using it here. So I got this wooden board that I use for taking photos and filming on, because it looks better than my dining room table. So I've clamped it to that. The problem is this isn't that heavy, so I just hope that it will hold, but it clamped okay to that wooden board, but I just hope that it will stay on. So this is an umbrella Swift. The other Swift I had that I showed you earlier, I think it's called Amish Swift. So this is an umbrella Swift, and you put the yarn on and then you race this thing up. I don't want to take it all the way down again because I've untied the yarn. And you can make it whatever size you want. My previous Swift was also an umbrella Swift. not the one I showed earlier in this video, but another one I've been using, cheap one I bought a few years ago. Just bought a cheap metal one on Amazon, and that was also an umbrella swift, but it was really cheap and horrible, and it wouldn't extend far enough, so a lot of hand-dyed yarns wouldn't fit on it because the skein sizes were too big. This one also has a thing at the top here, so that if you wanted to reskein yarn, so you wound it into a ball, or for example if you've unravelled a sweater, when you unravel something you've already knitted, it can be a little bit kinky. So if you, for example, unravel a sweater or a shawl or anything really, if the yarn is kinky, it is useful to wind it back into a hank or a skein and then wash it and leave it to dry to let all those kinks drop out. So if you want to do that, it's got a thing on the top here that you can kind of turn around to make it, I don't want to do it because I've got yarn on here. So let's see how this thing works. I'm going to tilt my camera down so you can see my ball winder as well, which is also Nipro. So we'll see how this thing works. So I've got a bit of a problem. It's not really winding properly. I don't know why, but as I started winding, this thing suddenly popped onto the table and I wasn't sure where it's fallen off, but I think it's come off my Swift. Off my ball winders. Let me just tilt this down a bit. I think it's come off here because that's the only place where I can see that it would have been screwed on. But trying to screw it back on again is really difficult, and I'm not quite sure how to get it back on again, to be quite honest. That's a little bit of a nuisance. I don't feel like it's working properly. I don't think I can screw this one off. So I'm not quite sure how I get this thing back on here, because I'm not quite sure how it came off, but there's like no resistance. It's also awkward because I'm using my left hand and it's winding on really, really messily. You know, it just looks really bad. Oh, it's working better now. It's not winding on very smoothly onto my ball winder. Another problem I have with the Swift is that it keeps catching on these bits. I think normally Swifts work better and ball winders work better if you have the Swift and the ball winder at the same level, but that's very difficult with this unless I have like a higher thing to put the ball winder on. It's very difficult, so I'm not quite sure what to do about that. But it's the ball's winding really, really badly, like really awful. Not really winding into a proper ball at all. So the only way I can kind of like get it to not keep catching on like here is to hold this up. And because of the way I've set this up, I'm actually using my left hand to wind the ball winder with, which I don't really like, but it's not winding it on properly, so something is wrong, and I think it's my ball winder that's the problem. And I think it's this little thing that's come off. So I'm not quite sure what to do about that. That's a bit of a nuisance because this ball winder is brand new. I've only used it a few times. I don't know, I think maybe I have to email the distributor and find out what's gone wrong, because I can't seem to get this thing back on again. Okay, so one thing I'm finding is that I have to hold the yarn so it comes straight off the Swift like horizontally, because my ball winder is lower. If I don't hold it, it keeps catching on these bits here. So I do find I have to like hold my hand like that. Let me just, I got a little tiny bit left, so I find I have to like hold it like that, which is a little bit annoying. It helps the tension of yarn and wind it more evenly onto the ball winder, and it means that if there are any snags or knots or anything, yarn catches on anything, you have more control really. So it's not a bad thing, but it is a little bit annoying because it is hurting my shoulder. Holding my arm up like this, I do have shoulder problems. So if I was going to wind several balls in a row, it would hurt my arm quite a lot to hold my arm up like that. But apart from that, it stayed on my board. You can see here it's not the table it's attached to, it's this board, and it stayed on there quite well. I was a bit worried that this might flop off my table. Once I got my ball winder working again, at one point it wound around this bit for some reason, so I had to wind it off again and rewind it, but it's wound quite a neat ball once I got this bit back on again. I don't know why that flew off. I emailed the distributor that I bought it from complaining, so now I've got to email them back and say I've got it fixed. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Let me know in the comments how you wind yarn. Do you use any of these tools, or do you just put the skein around the nearest chair or around your knees, or get somebody else to hold it for you while you wind the yarn by hand? I remember many hours as a child and teenager sitting holding the yarn for my mum. Actually, I think I was holding the yarn and my dad was winding it, or vice versa while my mum was knitting. But I do remember helping my mum wind yarn when I was a child. But I have used a chair and my knees and got my husband to help, and probably my kids as well. But I must admit, it is much easier to have all these tools. I appreciate they cost money, but if you buy quality tools, once you've got them, they last for years. Like this one I've had for many years. So let me know how you wind yarn. Have you tried any of these products? Any similar type of products? Let me know what you thought. And if you have any questions, leave a comment below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.